Blog Talk Radio.
Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for joining me on episode 41 of the show about the show. And as always, a happy Rusev Day to you all. I am joined on this episode by former Major League infielder Aaron Ledesma. He played for the Mets, the Orioles, the Rays, and the Rockies, and he is going to talk about his career in the big leagues, the minor leagues, as well as the really interesting thing that he's doing now post-baseball. And we'll talk current baseball, too. We'll talk a little bit about the game, the state of the game. We'll talk a little bit about the World Series, but you guys didn't come on here to listen to me talk. You guys came on here to listen to Aaron. So without any further ado, ladies and gentlemen, I'm very pleased and happy to present to you former Major League infielder Aaron Ledesma. Aaron, how you doing?
I'm doing great. How you doing?
I'm doing very well, thank you. So I wanted to start out. Let's talk a little bit about your career. You were drafted in the second round.
Correct.
Talk to me about what that whole draft process was like.
Oh yeah, back in 1990. At the time I really didn't have too much knowledge of the draft or professional baseball for that matter. I was just playing the game because I loved to play it and I was pretty good at it. I went from not being drafted out of high school and not even really getting looked at to being drafted in the second round. So it was all kind of new. My manager said that there was a possibility of me getting drafted, and I just did a lot of the right things at the right time, and I put myself in a really good position to get drafted that year. All up to the draft day, I didn't really know what to think. I wasn't even at home. I didn't even field the call when the Mets called me up. My mom and dad were at home, and we didn't have cell phones back then, so I think I was at my girlfriend's house at the time, and they called my girlfriend up, and and they said I was drafted. So it was a pretty exciting ride home, that's for sure. And celebrating with the family. I had a strong community of supporters where I grew up. I come from a town in California called Union City. It's sandwiched in between Oakland and San Jose in the Bay Area. And I had a nice support system out there, and we threw a nice party and just had a real good time for the next 3 or 4 days.
Excellent. Well, and you talked about, the draft was so much different back then. I mean, now it's televised, not the whole draft, obviously, but, there's so much more coverage now of the MLB draft. Can you kind of talk about, how the draft coverage has changed in terms of just not so much social media, but just, we know about these guys in high school now, like Byron Buxton's and Mike Trout's and guys like that, long before we ever see them step on a major league field. Can you kind of talk about the difference between when you got drafted and the draft of today?
Yeah, I'll try. I mean, full disclosure, I'm not a huge fan of, watching the games and, the draft, and I'm not a huge fan. I played baseball because I was good at it. I had good hand-eye coordination. I had some good coaching along the way, and I enjoyed playing it. But as far as, being the fan, I wish I was a bigger fan. So just up front, if I don't have, the knowledge to answer some of these questions, that's the reason. I enjoy playing the game on the field.
Absolutely.
So, but I'll just give you what I have, and, so – as far as the draft nowadays, I think, with the invention of Perfect Game and those showcase style tournaments, these younger players are getting a lot of exposure at a real young age. They're signing letters of intent to these colleges when they're freshmen and sophomores in high school. So they're getting, the exposure is incredible nowadays as opposed to when I played. When I played, the scout, I had maybe 1 or 2 scouts at a game, and that was pretty much it. And we didn't have perfect game back there. We had summer ball, we had the spring, we had the summer, and that was pretty much it for me, being from California. I didn't play in the winter. I didn't play in the fall. I just played, in the spring and in the summer. So the exposure, I didn't get the amount of exposure that these kids are getting nowadays. And I think that plays a lot into the draft and knowing these players at, such a young age.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Now let's talk a little bit about, obviously, you said you were drafted by the Mets in the second round of the 1990 draft. You made your debut in 1995. What was that year? What was that time between when you were drafted and making your major league debut in 1995? What was that kind of period in your life like? Kind of, being a minor league player, but still trying to get to the major leagues.
Yeah, it was rough. It was a rough grind. I was fortunate to get drafted at such a high round, where the Mets, they were going to move me along whether I got injured or I wasn't performing. They were going to move me through the system because they had, obviously they had money invested in me. So I was one of the fortunate ones to get carried along. I mean, I played well during the minor leagues, but I was getting hurt. My body just wasn't used to the grind of playing every day. And I didn't really know how to, pace myself. I mean, I was all or nothing. So I was always getting hurt. And so those 5 years there, it was rough. And, at that time, I was 19 when I got drafted, and I was still trying to figure out how to be like a young man, So there was a lot
right.
of just on the job training. Back then we had a sports kind of psychologist, but not like today where they have, I worked with the Yankees. The Yankees have 3 or 4 guys in the minor leagues that are just dedicated to working with their players, with their off-the-field troubles and all that stuff. So I didn't have that growing up, so it was pretty much figure it out, and if you don't really have a good foundation, if you don't have the foundation, it's rough when you're trying to learn it on your own, and you're in a state. I've never been out of California before I was drafted, and they threw me in Kingsport, Tennessee my first year, and I was like, where? So it was a little bit of a culture shock, but so you have all these things thrown at you at a very young age, and it was kind of up to me to figure it out. So it was a pretty long and rough ride, but I managed to see my way through it, and obviously I did something right. I got to the big league.
Absolutely. Let's talk about your major league debut. What do you remember about? Kind of walk us through that whole day. What you were feeling when you woke up. If you knew right away when you went to the ballpark if you were going to play. Just walk us through that entire day.
Yeah, I had just got to the big my first year. We were in Shea Stadium, and I was in Tidewater in Norfolk, Virginia, playing in AAA, and I believe Toby Harrah was my manager, and he said I'm getting called up. It was a pretty exciting time. So I remember that at bat. I don't really remember the day of or anything like that, but I remember the at bat. I remember walking up to the plate and knowing that this is my major league debut. This is what I've been working for my whole entire childhood and adult
right.
Young adult life. So I remember it like it was yesterday. Lefty. We were playing Cincinnati, I believe. I think John Smiley was the pitcher. And first pitch, man, he throws me, I think it's a fastball in. I just hit a little base hit to left field. I remember rounding first base, and I get back to first base, and I remember Frank Howard was our first base coach. Everybody knows Frank Howard.
Sure.
Big guy. Yeah, of course. Played for the Senators.
Big guy, yeah.
Hondo. He was my first base coach, and I remember him. He's like 6'7", man. This guy's a monster. And as soon as I get on back on first base, go ahead.
He made Harmon Killebrew look small. Yeah.
Yeah, this guy he was massive, and you love the guy to death. I get back to first base, and right away he's starting to tell me how many outs and this and that. And I'm like, Frank, this is my first hit. Let me take this in, So, it was all about thinking about family during that time. They flashed my name on the scoreboard. I remember that, saying that it was my first major league hit. So yeah, I'll never forget it.
Do you have the ball?
I believe my mom and dad still have it out in California.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Well,
yeah.
As many baseball fans know, moving organization to organization is a way of life, and that was no secret to you. You played for the Mets in '95. Prior to the 1996 season, the Mets decided to trade you. You were traded to the California Angels for Kevin Flora. Talk about what it's like to get to the big leagues and then get traded. What's that like?
Yeah. It's great. It's bittersweet. On one hand, you were drafted by a team. At some point, they believed in you, and you get to the big leagues with them, and then all of a sudden, it's like they don't believe in you anymore, and then they move you to somebody else. And that was the first time I realized that this is a pretty cutthroat business. So on one hand, it really stunk. But on the other hand, you're going to an organization that you hope wants you and, hope has a plan for you. I felt like the Mets had a plan for me. But then somebody they brought somebody on. His name was Ray Ordonez, a Cuban shortstop, really good. Had some time in the big league. So that pretty much moved me to third base, and then it was more of a question mark, like what to do with Aaron at this point. So I think that was a big reason. They had plans for Ordonez. He was a pretty slick fielder, as you may know.
Absolutely, yep.
Yeah, and I was okay with it. Jerry Hunsaker at the time, who I have a tremendous amount of respect for, was very upfront with me. I don't know if he was the one who traded me, but I know he was there during those last couple of years, and just have a huge amount of respect for the way he dealt with me and my situation. He was upfront. He was honest. And then I think Steve Phillips came into town, and then it was just kind of downhill from there. So, yeah, it's a bittersweet feeling being traded.
You spent the 96 season in the minors. You became a minor league free agent after the season. You signed with the Orioles, and then you were drafted by the Tampa Bay Devil Rays, who were called the Devil Rays at that time, from the Orioles in the 97 expansion draft with the 62nd pick. Being in the major leagues, on teams is one thing, but what was it like going into Tampa Bay in the 1997 season, knowing that that's their first season, and just kind of having a brand new ballpark and a new fan base and all that kind of stuff to get acclimated to? What's that like?
Yeah, it was very exciting. I had a really good year the year before with Baltimore. I tore it up in the minor league in AAA. And I got to the big leagues and I tore it up with like 100 at-bats or so. So that year, I really think I I solidified, proved myself to be a major league hitter. So I was feeling pretty good about going into this new organization. I felt like I had a really good chance of making the team. I had a couple, as a utility guy, I thought it was wide open. I thought it was my job to lose, and I've never felt that before. So I felt really good about it. And the excitement, it was 20 years ago this year. It's 20 years. It was really exciting to be a part of like something new. The fans were incredible that year. The support was great. The team, it was kind of a weird team. We had some older players who were finishing up their career. We had some kind of in-between players. We had some young players. And it didn't take long for us to gel as a group. It may not have shown on the field, but we definitely led the league in fun that year for sure. No question about that. But yeah, it was a good season, man. I had a really good year that year too. I had probably 300 at bats, and I think I hit 320, 330, somewhere around there. So I was just trying to solidify myself as a major league ball player.
Absolutely. We're a little over halfway through this episode. Aaron, would you mind taking a caller? We have a caller on hold. Would you mind taking a call?
I'll do the best I can.
All right. All right, caller, go ahead. You are on with Aaron Ledesma. Who are you? Where are you from?
My name is Jeff. I'm calling from Denver.
Yep. Hi, Jeff. How are you?
Doing well, Aaron. How are you?
I'm doing well. Doing good. Enjoying this beautiful weather in Florida right now.
It's Florida-like weather here in Denver, actually, too.
I love Denver. Denver is a nice town.
Well, we're a football town, as you well know. Broncos come first, and so when you got to the Rockies and got to Denver, how much, like within the organization, especially within the locker room, do the players talk about, like, winning fans over, winning the Broncos fans over, getting on local radio in the offseason, and making a name for the Rockies despite being a football town?
Oh, that's an interesting question. I don't really recall much conversation going on about that. I mean, I was only there. I was in the big leagues for a couple of months in Colorado, so I can't really speak to like how much of that was going on. I mean, I was a huge Denver fan growing up. I don't know why, but I think Elway was like my guy. I grew up in the San Francisco Bay Area, and it was either Steve Young or we had the Raiders, but the Raiders were, I think, in LA at the time. But anyway, I grew up an Elway fan, man, and I saw him lose playoff after playoff trying to win the big one, man, and it didn't really happen until later on when I stopped watching football. Once I got into baseball, I kind of like just focused on baseball. I didn't really talk too much about football. So I don't know if that answered your question, man, but again, I wasn't really there that long to get into that part of it.
Gotcha.
Yep.
Cool. Thank you.
All right. Have a good one.
Thanks, Jeffrey. Thanks, Aaron. So, Aaron, yeah, as Jeff mentioned, you did play for the Rockies, and like you said, you weren't in Colorado for a long time, but you were there for a little while. To me, again, after the '99 season, you were actually traded from Tampa Bay, along with Rolando Arroyo, to the Rockies for Vinny Castilla. Is it easier getting traded with a teammate as opposed to just being traded by yourself? Because then you have somebody that you're going into the new locker room knowing, or does it not kind of make a difference?
Well, in that case, when me and Arroyo were traded, it was nice to know somebody, but he didn't speak English, so it's not like we were like hanging out.
Right.
And I don't speak Spanish, so
okay.
that dynamic we weren't really hanging out too much. But yeah, I guess it can be, But when you're playing in the major leagues, like everybody is like it's a big family. What it boils down to, it's a big family, and whether you know the guy sitting next to you or not, you're sharing the same passion, you're sharing the same dream, and you're putting on a major league uniform, and that's a really tight knit community. So I don't think it matters that much if you're traded with somebody or you're traded by yourself.
Okay, perfect. We've got about 9 minutes and change left. I want to talk a little bit about you. So after your playing career was over, you served as the hitting coach for the Class A Tampa Yankees in 2008 and the Triple-A Scranton Wilkes-Barre Yankees in 2009-2010. What got you into coaching, and who are some of the players that listeners and fans may know that you coached or that you had on the teams, rather?
Yeah, I coached the Yankees for 4 years. I ended up managing my last year, and I had a lineup and a pitching staff full of big names. Gary Sanchez was my catcher. I had actually two catchers, J.R. Murphy and Gary Sanchez. I think J.R. is still in the big leagues.
Yeah, he's with Arizona, I believe. Yep.
Yeah, right, J.R. Yeah, he's doing a good job. Both really good players. Slade Heathcott, I don't know if he made the big leagues or not. He may have had a cup of coffee. He was my center fielder. I had a couple of big arms. I can't remember this guy's name. But I had a couple of big arms that I know are still in the big leagues now. So yeah, I've had quite a few. I was in AAA for a little bit, and in my first year in AAA coaching, man, we were stacked. We had Ian Kennedy. I can't remember some of these big names. Shelley Duncan was on that team.
Sure.
Yeah, there's so many that it's and we're going back 10 years now.
Right.
But that was good. Yeah, it was good. The Yankees were great, man. I learned a lot. I'm glad they gave me the opportunity to manage, just to see the game through a manager's eyes. I didn't realize how fast the game was until I managed. When you're the one making the decisions, the game can speed up on you. It's easy to make decisions when you're on the side, but when it's up to you making the decisions, I don't care what level you're coaching it or managing at, the game has a tendency to speed up on you. So it was a great learning experience. I enjoyed it. I wish I had the opportunity to do it again, but the Yankees decided that that I wasn't going to manage again. So I decided to choose a different route.
And you definitely did go a different route, and that is a great segue, actually, into your post-playing career. Now, a lot of players, they'll get into the financial side of things. They'll get into business, or they might get into, whatever the case may be. You and your wife, Karen, live in Clearwater, or decided to open a unique business in Clearwater, Florida. What kind of business did you open, and how did that come about?
Yeah, we opened a yoga studio here in Clearwater. We specialize in hot yoga. When I retired, I had back surgery, and that's why I had to retire at a young age. It pretty much stopped me in my tracks. And a friend of mine, after I had the surgery, he said, you got to try this yoga. You might like it. It might help your back out a little bit. I mean, I had the surgery, but I was still in pain. So I tried it, and I ended up falling in love with it because it was something I can do. I can stay in shape, and it actually heals your body. It doesn't break your body down. It doesn't break your joints down. So I started practicing yoga pretty consistently after I retired. And I ended up meeting, actually, let me go back a little bit further. I liked it so much, I got certified to teach it. kind of my personality. When I really like something, I just kind of go all in. So I really wanted to learn more about it and understand it. So I went to LA for 2 months and I got certified to teach. Ended up retiring fully from baseball. And I got back to the Tampa area and just started teaching at studios in the area here, meeting some different people. And I ended up meeting my wife in one of my yoga classes I was teaching. So we started dating. We ended up getting married. That's when I got into baseball again, spent 4 years. And then I just got really tired of traveling with the baseball, especially in the minor leagues. So my wife and I just decided to open up this studio here in Clearwater. We wanted to settle down and raise a family. So this seemed like a pretty good option. An opportunity came up, and we jumped on it. So we've been open for 6 years now, and everything's going great. Tell people that are listening to this how they can get in contact with you if they're in Florida or in the Clearwater area. What's the name of the business? How can they get a hold of the business? That kind of thing. Yeah, it's called Yoga 365. Yoga 365. Pretty easy. You can just type in Yoga 365 in Clearwater, and we will come up.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
Aaron, we're winding down. We got about 3 and change left. Let's talk a little bit about fan mail. How much fan mail do you still get?
Yeah, I still get fan mail. It's incredible. I don't know how people find me, but I get it at my business and I get it at my residence. And I'm amazed because I've moved several times. I've had more addresses. I can't even tell you how many different places I've lived in the last 10, 15 years. But somehow I keep getting this mail. So there must be a mailing list out there that you can access. But yeah, I get maybe on the average probably 5 to 10 cards a month with, people asking for an autograph.
Sure. And do you accommodate them, or is it something where you're just kind of like, I want to put the baseball part of my life in the past?
A big part of me wants to do that, but the fans they deserve it. So I'll it may take me a while. I may put it in the desk for a little while, and then I always get back to it.
Absolutely.
So occasionally, I'll see one like, oh wow, this has been here for like 3 months. So I'll sign it and I'll drop it in the mail. It's not
sure.
High on the priority list, but I make it a point to get back to everybody and sign the card. I have no problem with that.
Absolutely. I'd be remiss if I didn't ask a former major leaguer, especially one who played in the AL East, his World Series pick. You've got Dodgers, Red Sox. You've got Red Sox up 2-0 after being at home for the first 2 games. Next 3 games are in Dodger Stadium. Last 2 are in Fenway. As somebody who has played in both Fenway Park and Dodger Stadium, I know you said you don't follow the game a whole lot, but you've got 200 wins or 100-plus win teams in the World Series. Give me a World Series prediction.
Well, yeah, with being up 2 games, I'll take the Sox, no question. But, I actually watched the game last night. This is my first game of the postseason. I saw the game last night. I liked the way David Price looked. I saw some highlights from the big lefty, Chris Sale, is that his name?
Yep.
I don't know his name. Yeah. He looked fantastic. So they got a couple of big bullets. I'm sure they got some more coming up. So, Eduardo Nunez, that's another guy that I had, just to throw that in there. He hit a home run in game 1. Yeah, he was my shortstop. But, So I was actually pulling for when I saw that I'm a California guy, so I'll pull for a California team. But I think Boston matches up pretty good.
Well, fans, there you have it. Former Major Leaguer Aaron Ledesma is going with the Red Sox, who are currently up 2-0 on the Dodgers. Aaron, I cannot thank you enough for giving me a half an hour of your time. You can find him in the Clearwater area at Yoga 365. Just look that up, do a Google search for it, type it in. You'll find the phone number, the contact information for Aaron and his business. Aaron, thank you so much for your time and for what you did for the game of baseball. I greatly appreciate you coming on the podcast.
Oh, it was great. It was great being here. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for coming on. Appreciate it.
All right, take care. Bye now.
You too. Thank you. All right, folks, that was former Major Leaguer Aaron Ledesma. He played for 4 teams, the Mets, the Orioles, the Rays, and the Rockies. You can tell that he has been able to kind of move past the game of baseball. He has opened a yoga studio, Yoga 365. It is in Clearwater, Florida. Please look him up if you are in the Clearwater area. They specialize in hot yoga. Got another episode coming up later tonight. It's going to be kind of a different style episode. It's going to be with a gentleman named Pete Gorton here in Minnesota. He lives down in Minneapolis. He is doing research for a movie about a Negro League player who may be the greatest baseball player that nobody has ever heard of. We're going to spend a full hour talking with Pete about that. He was recently interviewed for KARE 11 out of the Twin Cities, which is their NBC affiliate, and we're going to talk about the project that he is working on called 39 Seconds. So that'll be a real good episode. It's going to be a Negro League heavy episode. So if you're a fan of the Negro Leagues, please make sure you listen. As always, thank you to everybody who listened. Thank you, Jeffrey, for calling in. And this has been episode 41 with former Major Leaguer Aaron Ledesma, episode 41 of the show about the show. We'll see you down the road in podcast land.